Hi, my name is Arthur Vinci. I'm a writer, director, and producer, and I'm here to talk to you about music licensing. One of the things I see that trips up first-time filmmakers or beginning filmmakers is budgeting properly for music. You spend a lot of time and energy and money on production, and then you get to post and there's nothing left. Music is a fantastic way to increase the production value of your film. It can establish a mood. It can make your film seem bigger than it is. It is not a fix-it for a badly executed project, but it can really take your film to another level. And for all of that, it is immensely cost effective. But the thing is that you have to budget properly for music, and you can't just say, well, no one's going to notice if I take a popular song and just use a little snippet of it. Trust me, they will notice, especially if you are going to want distribution for your film of any kind. Even if you're just putting it up yourself on YouTube, the distributors will not touch your film at all if you don't have the rights to use even a little tiny sliver of music. And in fact, that was the very first question I've ever been asked by any distributor for a film that I've worked on or have directed, was, hey, do you have the rights to the music? Not like, who's in it or how much did it cost? Or you'd think that there would be a bunch of other business questions they would ask first. The first thing was, do you have the clearance for the music? So there's different ways to deal with creating music for your film. Well, putting music in for your film. The first thing you have to realize is that music, from a legal and rights perspective, consists of two things. Number one is the synchronization rights. So this is the right to use the underlying sheet music in your film. It's analogous to having the right to adapt a novel into a script. So the sheet music is the underlying intellectual property. The second right is the master recording rights. That's the right to use the very specific recording of that music in your film. Now, where things get complicated is that these two rights can be owned by two different entities that may in fact have nothing to do with each other. And the two rights are severable. In other words, you could have something that's in the public domain. The sheet music is in the public domain, but if you want to use a specific 1968 recording of a Sousa song, you're going to have to pay whoever owns the rights to that recording for it. So I'm going to describe several different strategies that you can use to put music in your film, along with the pros and cons of each, and then we'll break down these two different rights in a little more detail. The first method for dealing with music in your film is you can create the music. Are you a musician? Do you play an instrument? Can you compose music? Great, you've just solved the problem before it's even started. There are several filmmakers who, in fact, do something like this. Hal Hartley composes his own music under a pseudonym, Ned Rifle. John Carpenter is famous for putting his own music in films. If you're not a musician per se, but you have strong musical ideas, or you might have a musical background, but perhaps you don't feel confident in your ability to play, at a virtuoso level, you can still create music for your film. One way to do that is through loops, looping tools such as Acid or GarageBand. There are several different programs out there. Most of them are pretty low cost. These are programs that work by assembling loops or small snippets of music according to a prearranged grid. So you set your time signature, your key, your beats per minute, and then you arrange these loops. And I've done this for a couple of experimental shorts where, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of money and I didn't want to ask my friends for a freebie or a favor. So I just, put something together on my own, and it can work very well. I don't know if I would want to score a feature this way. I do know folks who have used a combination of acid loops to fill in little snippets or what are called sometimes musical stings or cues, and then they've composed the rest of the score themselves, or they've hired somebody to compose the score. We'll talk about that option in a little bit. Another option is to go to music libraries. There are some very big music libraries, and then there are also individual composers who, for different reasons, have decided to get into this business of basically offering a score element or a song for a fixed price. So you go to this library or to this composer, you pay a flat fee, and then you get the song and you can use it however you see fit. So you don't owe any royalties, or you don't have to pay, you don't have to negotiate with different entities in the manner I described earlier with these two rights. The piece is yours to work with into the film. One thing to keep in mind is that, if you're buying a piece of library music, somebody else could have bought that same piece of library music, and you could run into this issue of perhaps having a score that ends up sounding like something else that's out there. However, on the whole, this is also a very good option. If you are on a limited budget, it's at least worth looking into. Most of these libraries have samples that you can play, and of course, they also have keywords or genres that they're tagged to. So you don't have to worry that you're getting the wrong kind of music for your film. You can get something that fits what you're doing. I do know of people who, even if they don't score the film in its final state this way, they do have libraries of music that they purchased so that they can at least lay down temp tracks that'll help them cut or help them direct the composer of the final score in the artistic direction they want. So that's also an option. The third option is to put in public domain music. Copyright law in its modern state kind of dates to the 1920s, and it's evolved and changed over time. So there is a body of recorded music that exists from the early days of records until the 20s or 30s, and there's some other stuff that's come along since then that's been recorded that has, for one reason or another, fallen into the public domain. Now here's where things get tricky. Remember, I said that there are two rights associated with music: the sync rights and the master recording rights. Where you can get into trouble is if you have a piece of music that you think is in the public domain, the sheet music is in the public domain, but the specific recording of that music is in fact owned by a record company. So what can happen is that you place the music in your film, you think, everything's great, everything's wonderful, and then the record company comes after you and says, hey, you now owe us a lot of money. The big thing I'm trying to get at here is that you have to do some research into the music that you would like to use. So this leads to the next way to deal with music in your film: license existing material. Find a song that you like, you think that it's a perfect fit for your scene, and then you go and you license it. Now, who do you license it from? So it turns out that a lot of musicians do not actually own the underlying rights to their own material. A lot of musicians sign the sync rights to a publishing company, and then the master recording rights go to the record company. Now, sometimes these two entities are the same, oftentimes they're not. The publishing company and the record company that the artist originally signed these rights away to may not exist anymore, and those rights will be are fungible commodities. In other words, they can be bought and sold. So the publishing company, when it went under, might have gotten swallowed up by a bigger publishing company which now owns the rights to that song. the sync rights to that song. The record company may have gone under, and its entire catalog of titles may have been bought by another record company or by an investment bank, or another entity. So sometimes finding out who owns what can be a little difficult. Now, there is a whole class of film professional called a clearance supervisor who does this for a living. This is exactly what they do, and they work with the legal counsel for the producer and the post supervisor to determine who owns what and what is the agreed upon price for the licenses. Obviously, you may not have the budget for this specialist, so what do? You start by, like I said, researching who owned the rights at the time of these two sets of rights at the time that the song came out. From there, you can usually trace what happened to those companies in the intervening years. The other thing you can do is if the musician has an agent, or sometimes you can, if you know the musician or you have some way of getting to the musician directly, you can ask them, hey, who has the rights to these two songs? Now, it's possible that the musician has the sync rights and the master recording rights, or may have one or the other of those two things, in which case you would be dealing directly with the musician. If you're dealing with the musician's agent or manager, then they'll be the one kind of coordinating with you to get the rights and to determine what the fair price is. One thing I would caution is that there are a lot of people out there who will tell you they have the rights to things that they do not have. And I can't get into details, but I have some personal experience with this. Not on any of the films I've directed, but on films that I've worked on as a post supervisor or line producer. The price that you're going to pay for the sync rights and the master recording rights, those two things are usually in sync with each other. So in other words, if the master recording rights cost you $200, the sync rights will also cost you $200. There is no set standard for these prices. It depends enormously on the popularity of the song, on the whims of whoever owns the rights. You have to consider too that you are going to be spending some of your legal dollars, if you're smart, going over the rights contract with whoever the parties are that owns these rights. So make sure to bake that into your calculations as well. Like, in other words, it's not just the $200 here and the $200 here. It could be even more money when you're going over the agreement. You may get a record company that tells you that they will agree to give you the festival rights for free with the actual purchase, actual rights to be determined in good faith if the film gets a distribution deal. Now, why wouldn't you want to do this? Well, the problem is that festival rights really aren't a thing exactly. So, in other words, what you're agreeing to is you're basically you and the record company or whoever the rights holder is agreeing that you can use the film you can use the music in your film as long as that film is shown in a non-commercial venue like a film festival. But as soon as that film gets a distributor, which is the goal, right? You want your film to get a distributor, or is seen in a commercial context, which could even include free public streaming services such as YouTube, you will then have to pay for the rights that you didn't pay for upfront. And because you're at a point where you're about to distribute your film, you have less leverage. You've already done the sound mix. Have already signed the contracts with the distributor. Or maybe you're about to sign the contracts with the distributor and the distributor is saying, well, we're not signing anything till you get the music rights cleared. You go back to the publisher or the record company and say, okay, I've got a distributor. Now what are you going to charge me? Then they have the leverage to name almost any price they want, and it'll be like kind of a take it or leave it situation. You either have to be willing to rip out that score, put in something else, and then remix that section of the film, or fork over money that you possibly didn't have in your budget. So as you can see, this process is somewhat fraught. It's very easy to spend quite a lot of time trying to find the rights, only to find out that you're kind of chasing your tail. Like, nobody seems to know who owns the rights to the song. There are a couple of online resources for finding out who may own rights to a song, but none of them are 100% complete. To give you a very specific example, in my own work, a few years ago when I finished my web series, I really fell in love with a piece of music that was part of my temp score. It was from an album that was a collaboration between two very, very well-known musicians, and the album was from 1994. In the interim, one of the musicians died. The record label that had recorded the music went under. The publishing company that the publishing rights had been assigned to did not exist anymore. So it took a while for me to find out who was in charge of the estate of the deceased musician, and also who bought the record company. I actually had a little more luck there. I figured out who now owns the library from that company, and then I eventually got to an agent for the other musician. So it took a while, and ultimately we couldn't go anywhere because the price I had in my budget was far below what they would normally have licensed the music for, and I wanted a lot of it. Like, it was it was from a 6-ish minute segment of the last episode. Ultimately, what happened is I decided to go with the next option that I'm going to talk about: hire a composer. When you hire a composer, you have to work out with the composer who is going to own what at the end of the process. A lot of times, the composer will retain the copyright and could theoretically do other things with the score, but then they have to consult with you before they can't just sort of dump the score they wrote for you into another film without talking to you about it first. In other situations, you own the score for all intents and purposes, so it's considered a work for hire. These contracts can be a little bespoke and can require a little bit of finesse. Composers who do this for a living, they're pretty, they understand, especially if you're just starting out, that you don't have a lot of legal resources. And most of the time, they really want to make things work. And if they want to work with you, that's really what's the most important thing. So they can work with you to craft an agreement where everybody comes out okay. They get paid a decent amount of money, and then you get the score you need and whatever other deliverables are needed, and we'll get into that in a second. And you're getting exactly the score that a score that's crafted specifically for the film. In the case of the web series, I had a bunch of temp tracks layered in that gave me some help when it was time to edit, and also kind of helped establish a mood. Working with my go-to composer, Quentin Chiappetta, who's also a sound designer, I gave him the list of temp tracks, and we had to listen to them, and I also sent him some samples of other music elements that I thought, were kind of inspiring to me, as a good jumping off point for him. As this came while I was still cutting the film, he kind of sketched out some rough ideas for me, and we kind of passed them back and forth. And then once the picture was locked, I then gave him a quick time of the of the series, along with my notes and timecode burn-in on the QuickTime so that he could reference specific individual frames, and we would never get lost as to where something should go. At the other end of the process, he gave me back the wave files from the score elements, and also gave me a music cue sheet indicating start and end times. And that's very critical for when you're going to the sound mix, because you don't want to make things slip. You want to make sure things don't slip or that they're in the wrong place. Also, some distributors will want a cue sheet with the names of the tracks, the duration, and who wrote it, and so on. So having a composer who already knows how to prepare those for you is just great. There are a couple other edge cases I want to mention here. So one option is you can, like I said before, you can license public domain music. So if you want to use a Bach cello, unaccompanied cello piece, you do not have to pay. There's no Bach estate out there. Bach wrote his music long before modern copyright laws. So the sheet music is free. However, somebody owns a specific recording of the Bach piece you want to use. So you will have to pay whoever owns that recording. One way around this is you could hire your composer to record that Bach piece. So in other words, you are still paying somebody, but you are paying possibly less money than if you had to make a deal with Sony Records. One thing I see a lot of in films and TV shows is you'll see a cover of a very popular song. Now, I think that that's done purely for aesthetic reasons, but it may also be done for economic reasons, because you're getting the sheet music, the sync rights for Smells Like Teen Spirit from whoever owns the sheet music at this point, but then you're having a local band cover it instead of going back to whoever owns the recording of the Nirvana song. You may be paying less money to that local band than you might be paying to the record company. So that's another way in which you can sort of use this dual split to your advantage. You can have a less famous group cover a famous song, and then you're still paying money, but you may be paying less money than if you license the song, the original version of that song. One of the things I would say is, no matter what you do, keep in mind, musicians are horribly exploited, even more so now in the streaming age than they were before. These are your fellow artists, and I hope that you would treat them fairly. So honestly, if you can find a good composer who is giving you what you need, that's a treasure. That person is a treasure, and you'll want to keep working with them over and over again.